Hey there, friends and family. As you may have figured out at this point, I have added a video component to some of the media things that I've been doing. I didn't think it was quite enough for me to just subject you to my writing and the sound of my voice. Now you actually have to look at me, so apologies up front. Really though, I've decided to add this video component for a couple of reasons. One, it was something that some of my students suggested, something they brought up, talked about, Nielsen, why don't you do a TED Talk type of thing, or create something that's sort of good news to juxtapose some of the negative messages we see in our media. So I thought that sounded like kind of a good idea, and this kind of is a harken back to really where all this media stuff started. I started doing some of the blog stuff originally and doing some things after I had gotten sick about 5 years ago. It's something that I've written about before and talked about before, and had a series of some health problems. And in the beginning, when I first got sick and was really having a lot of problems and really feeling, quite bad, and wasn't sure quite what was going on, going to a lot of doctors, didn't have a lot of answers, and I just started recording some things. Those are things that I won't publish, but that's kind of where it started. It sounds a little cliche, but being sick like that, not having a lot of answers, kind of gave me a little stronger realization about my mortality, or about, maybe put into focus some of the things that I wanted to accomplish, or some of the things that I wanted to say, especially to my own kids. So I just started taking my laptop out into the garage and talking to it, talking about things that I thought were important, messages that I wanted my kids to have, because we don't know how long we'll be around to do those sorts of things. And it became very clear to me that I should use the time that I have to do the things that I want to do the things that I felt were important, to try and give my kids the messages I wanted them to have. So that's really where all this all started. The other thing, or the other reason that I'm starting the video stuff, is because it's something that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that's a good thing. I have a tendency to jump into things that make me a little uncomfortable without a lot of planning. Even this, I bought a camera. I've got my daughter's sheet from her bed hanging up behind me. Claire, I'll put it back when I'm done. But I like to just jump into things that make me a little bit uncomfortable, because that's where growth starts. That's where we start to make the changes that we want to see in our lives. That's how we grow and get better and improve. And that's kind of a big theme of all the media stuff that I do, but especially this next month. I'm recording this on January 6th. I'll put that out today yet. And, in January, it's the time for New Year's resolutions, for people to look at themselves and think about the things they want to change about themselves, or the things they want to change in their lives. And that's going to be some things that we look at over the next month with some of the blog stuff, with, I've got one really, I think it's a really good podcast interview that I'm going to put out that I'll talk about a little bit later. And I've got some other stuff lined up that I hope will really kind of speak to that idea of how do we start making those changes, how do we put ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable, and how do we grow from there. And really this whole thing, the video thing, had me thinking about my start in college, about being uncomfortable to start with, and then where we go from there. Which I'm sure showing up to college is probably a time of a little anxiety for a lot of people. But I had a especially striking welcome to college. I went to college to play football, and I played at Upper Iowa University, which is an NCAA Division II institution here in Iowa. And I already was coming in a little anxious. I was a really undersized lineman. I played my high school football at about 200 pounds, and I was an offensive and defensive lineman. If you don't know, that's a really small lineman for high school. It's really, exceptionally small at any level of college. So, I was already kind of anxious about that going in. I was, really working out a lot, trying to put on some weight, and I probably showed up to camp my freshman year of college at about 215 pounds. Pretty small for a defensive lineman when I was going there to play. And to add to that, I was going to start my college career on a medical red shirt. Now, if you're not sure how that system works, a red shirt is basically where you're not competing in games. If it's a regular red shirt, you're going to practices, you're going to all the training sessions, you're in all the meetings, all that, but you don't actually get to compete in games. They're saving a year of eligibility. Well, I started on a medical red shirt. Medical red shirt means you have some sort of injury or something like that. I had a fairly minor knee surgery when I was in high school, and then I was working out really hard leading up to college, trying to gain weight and trying to get ready, and probably overdid some things and was having some knee problems. So they just started me on a medical red shirt, which that saved a year of eligibility. And I could also take a regular red shirt later if I had to, because I really needed to gain some weight and do some things like that. So it wound up working out good, but I was coming into college as this undersized lineman who wasn't even going to get to compete in practice, because if you're in a medical red shirt, you're not even practicing. So I would be going to all of the practices, all the meetings, all the film sessions, but not really doing anything. So if you're a competitive person in general, and especially in football where there's, for better or worse, sort of a little bit of machismo involved where you want to try and prove yourself, and I wasn't going to have that going in. So we show up the first day, report to camp the first day at the beginning of August. And you move into your dorm room, you meet your roommate, all those sorts of things. And then there was the first team meeting. So there's 100 and some odd guys, filling this room, most of whom I'm seeing for the first time. Maybe a couple guys I ran into on a recruiting visit or something like that. But for the most part, it's all fresh faces. And we're having our, meeting, coaches are talking, and then they ask the different position groups to come up and introduce themselves. So I find out later that some of the guys who had already been playing there had heard that they were getting this really high-level recruit to play quarterback, this freshman quarterback, and which was true. And I find out that some people thought that I might have been that freshman quarterback because I kind of looked the part. Now, keep in mind, my freshman year in college was in 2003. So at the time, I weigh about 215 pounds. I'm rocking the spiky, frosted tip kind of band boy hair a la NSYNC. That's the look that I'm working with at the time. I don't remember for sure, but there's probably a good chance I was wearing the white shell necklace of the era, and I think I had some brightly colored shirt on. So I look like maybe I'm a surfer guy, and I have the build of what seems appropriate for a quarterback. So already, the defensive line's the first group to introduce themselves to everyone. So already I walk up there with all these big college defensive linemen, and I look out of place, and already people are a little confused because they were hoping maybe I was the quarterback, and I was not. So we're up there, and it's going down the line. Everybody's introducing themselves, saying name, position, where they're from, that sort of thing. And it gets to me. don't know if you've, noticed, but my voice sounds like this. And I'm standing there looking like this skinny surfer kid. And I probably was, trying to puff my chest a little bit and maybe sound a little, gruffer than normal too, to kind of, show that I belong. So I stand up there and I say, yeah, my name's Luke Nielsen, defensive end from St. Ansgar, Iowa, and laughter ensues. Now, I imagine not everyone in the room was laughing at me, but it sure felt like everyone in the room was laughing at me. I'm talking coaches, players, just laughter. So my very first experience in college, I'm sitting there going, well, I could go home now. This isn't off to a real great start. And, the meeting ends, it's fine, but then I have the onslaught of people coming up after me, going like, hey man, is that your real voice? Like, yeah. You played defensive end, you're not a big guy, that sort of thing. And again, I can't really show anybody that I belong because I'll just be attending everything on a medical red shirt. So, college didn't start on a real high note for me. Shortly thereafter, wind up breaking up with my high school girlfriend who was going to the same college. Real shortly after. Which, not a big deal, but at 18, it seemed maybe a little more significant than it was. So all of this happens, and I'm starting off college feeling pretty uncomfortable. Feeling like, man, maybe I made a bad choice. I'm not really starting on a high note here. Maybe I'll just transfer. Go somewhere else once my knee's feeling better, and I can jump in playing there and kind of start fresh. And that was really my initial thought. And I think that's where a lot of us start with things is stuff doesn't go the way that we imagine it going. We don't get the start that we think we're going to have. So I think a common reaction is to say, well, I'm going to cut and run. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to start fresh. And that's really where New Year's resolutions and things come from. It's a fresh start. Luckily, for no real planned reason, I decided, I'm going to ride out this first year. I'm not going to transfer in the middle of the year. I'm going to give it my best effort for the first year and then see where I'm at come spring. So I go through football and all this stuff, all the meetings, I'm at everything, and I'm learning a lot even though I'm not playing. I actually lose some weight that I'd worked really hard to put on going into college, but I'm not working out as much. I'm not lifting as hard, not doing any of the lower body lifts, squats and things like that, so I'm losing some weight. So, the tail end of the football season, I'm probably hovering around the 200 pounds that I was playing at in high school. But I'm like, this is okay. I get cleared to start doing everything after the season. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to give it my best effort in the lifting and the running. Classes were going well, and I was starting to make friends. And I can honestly say, a lot of my friends from college are the closest friends I've ever had in my life. Friends who we really became like family. So things are starting to look a little better, and I'm saying, okay, I'm just going to focus on the things that I can control, whether that's working out, whether that's in school, whatever it is. I'm going to focus on the things that I can control, and things kept getting better. I started forming these really close friendships. By spring ball that year, I'm starting on the defensive line. Coaches want me to keep gaining a bunch of weight so that I can play defensive tackle the next fall, which I do. I go from probably 195, 200 pounds during that freshman football season, and I report to camp my sophomore year at 265 pounds. And starting from day one. So, in the grand scheme, maybe, college football is not as important as a lot of the things in life, but I think, it just reminded me of some of these things that we do in our lives where we feel uncomfortable and maybe our first reaction is to shy away from that discomfort. Where really it's a good thing. It's a good thing to put ourselves in those places where we maybe don't feel the best right away, or discomfort gives us a place to grow. It's that pressure that allows us to adapt and change and accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. And that's really going to be the focus of a lot of the stuff for the month of January here, as some people are, whether you're setting an actual resolution that you've written down or something, or you're creating some goals for yourself. That's kind of the focus of some of the media stuff that's going to be coming out here, is looking at how do we make ourselves uncomfortable? How do we put on that pressure and give the time necessary to adapt and change so that we can be who we want to be and accomplish the things we want to accomplish? And, whether it's my students getting this message from me in class or watching this sort of thing, or if it's one of my kids watching one of these down the road or reading something, or anybody out there who's been checking out the media stuff, I want that to be a continual message, is that you can change and become whoever and whatever you want to be. And if anybody has told you otherwise, if anybody's tried to put those obstacles in your way where they're saying, oh, you can't do that, or that's not practical, that says nothing about you and everything about them. That's got everything to do with their fears and, their discomfort that they're not willing to deal with. It has nothing to do with you. And that's really what we're looking at for the next month. A couple days after I post this video, I'm going to release a podcast that I did with my brother Logan. It's the second podcast that I've done with him. For me, it's my favorite thing that I've done so far with all this media stuff. And that's really because of Logan. If you haven't listened to Logan's first podcast interview, I suggest you do that. So I'm going to release this video, and then in a couple days I'll release the second interview, just for anybody who's maybe jumped in the media stuff after Logan's first interview. It was the first thing that we released with the LukeNielsen.com, the website, and all the media stuff. And it's just been, it was a really powerful interview, not because of anything that I did, but because of Logan sharing some stuff about his mental health challenges, the things that he was dealing with at the time and continues to deal with. And the second interview is a really nice follow-up, because in that first interview, Logan was really a month or a month and a half removed from what was a really dark point, what was really a low point for him. And we kind of talked about mental health while he was right in the thick of it, while things really weren't going that well and he was trying to manage some things. And then in the second interview that we did right around Christmas time, and I'll release here in a couple days, was this great follow-up to look at things that Logan has been doing to help himself work through some of those things, some things that have been working for him. So I think it's a really inspirational message for anyone who's dealt with mental health stuff, and for anyone in general. I mean, I think all of us need to take time to take care of our mental health in the same way we take care of our physical health. And it's a great look at that. And Logan says some really, for me, wonderfully inspiring things and optimistic things and hopeful things. So I hope that's a message that people get from it. After we released that first one, the reaction from people was incredible, and it was pretty humbling. People would send me a message or come up to me and tell me how much it meant to them to have my brother share those things, how it made them feel like maybe they weren't alone in some of the challenges that they've had, and that was incredible. And it was very humbling because there was a lot of people who I know in my personal life, and I didn't know that they were going through things like that. And that's really the hope with all this stuff, is to try to connect with people in a real and positive way. So, I encourage you to check that out. I'll be occasionally putting out some of these different videos, just kind of around the regular blog posts and the podcast interviews, as a way to sort of expand on some of the things that I talk about in those, or that come up in interviews, and get to talk about things in a little more informal way, and maybe share some stories and some things like that, and do some different things that I want to do that I think will be best served in the video format. So you can be looking for all that stuff coming out. And again, I'll drop this today, and then in a couple of days that second interview with Logan will come out. But I really appreciate everybody who's been checking out all the stuff. I've got a lot of big things that I want to do with it for 2019 as well. So we'll focus on that, growing the media stuff and growing individually, and that'll be the message for a lot of the things here for the next month or so at least. And thanks everybody, appreciate it, and see you around the way.